All right, now let's bring in Mandy Gunasekara, former EPA Chief of Staff. Mandy, this is nutty stuff. Are Democrats attempting to skirt the Supreme Court's EPA versus West Virginia ruling for their green agenda? Take a listen to what Senator Ted Cruz told Larry on this show back in August.
There's an element of this bill that is particularly noxious. It's buried in there, which is the Democrats are trying to overturn the Supreme Court's West Virginia versus EPA victory came just a month ago, where the court concluded the EPA didn't have the ability to rewrite our environmental laws to regulate carbon. Apparently, Joe Manchin has cut a deal with Chuck Schumer to slip into this bill language overturning that decision, which empowers the EPA to destroy your job.
So Mandy, does the EPA have the authority to implement this rule and basically eradicate gas vehicles in the country?
No, you're right to call this what it is, Sean, which is a de facto ban on the internal combustion engine. And nowhere in EPA's mission nor legal mandate did they have the authority to outright ban technologies that they simply don't like because of political reasons and a desire to appease their top donors. The Major Questions Doctrine, which was a huge victory under the West Virginia versus Clean Power Plan case, made clear that the power to write laws lies in Congress, not at EPA, but they will continue to try and ignore that and chip away in a multitude of ways. And the latest example of that is this proposed rule trying to do away with internal combustion engine and prop up their politically preferred electric vehicle technologies.
Mandy, you're at the EPA. Is anyone concerned about national security? Because 80% of cobalt is refined in China. 60% of lithium is refined and manufactured in China. So we're outsourcing American energy independence to China at a time when they're saber rattling. They're going to go to war with Taiwan. They're talking about going to war with us. They're calling us enemies. Does anyone care about that issue at the EPA?
Well, right now, that's a really good question. We certainly cared in the Trump administration when we instituted the America First policy approach to energy development and environmental protection. Under the Biden administration, we've seen time and time again their willingness to sell out the American economy and our natural interests just to comply with their Green New Deal dreams. And so it's a very good question because it is the CCP, not the American people, that stand to benefit from this latest EV mandate, because the electric vehicle batteries, the majority of the critical minerals that go into those batteries are owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And we're talking about environmental degradation here, but they also ignore basic humanitarian standards, and they rely on both forced and child labor to deliver these critical minerals to market. So there's a lot of questions. I think at the top of that list should be the national security implications, because energy security is directly tied to national security. And this administration goes out of its way not only to sell out the American economy, but to shift reliance on important minerals and resources overseas, falling into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party.
Maybe they should care about those 9-year-old little kids in Congo that are mining without any kind of protective gear, cobalt, getting sick and almost dying. I want you to react to this because Senator Joe Manchin was on Fox News Sunday on April 2nd talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's look at it.
I'm very, very disappointed in how they have interpreted a piece of legislation that is not how it was written. It was not the intent, and it's not the agreement that President Biden and I had. So I'm hoping that he intervenes and basically says, listen, we need energy security. We have to produce fossil energy cleaner and better than ever before, but we need an amount of it that we can be energy independent and secured as a nation. We can also invest in the technologies that will have energy for the future.
Mandy, he's walking away from the Inflation Reduction Act, Joe Manchin is. He's running for re-election in a Republican state. It's crushing his state. It's crushing energy. He's trying to take his hands off it, but he's the one that negotiated it. He's the one that shepherded it through the Senate, got it through the House. This is all his fault, isn't it?
Of course it is. He was the deciding vote, and it shouldn't be that way in American politics, but that's the reality. When Joe Manchin decided to openly negotiate with Joe Biden and his team, he was selling out both the West Virginia industry that's very much tied to the resources, but also the American energy industry. The reality is that we can mine and develop all the resources we need here in this country, but it's the Biden administration that will not get out of the way. And Joe Manchin, by virtue of getting the Inflation Reduction Act through Congress, he was a big piece of that. So the voters of West Virginia, they need to remember that, and I believe that they will. We're going to need a very strong candidate to run against him, but he has no business representing a state like West Virginia, and he really has no business having an outside voice into the future of American energy policy, because he showed a willingness to sell out short-term benefit for long-term consequences we are all going to have to be dealing with.
You know, Mandy, we were talking about China. There's a new report that says a number of green energy projects across the U.S. are being developed with Chinese companies. Mandy, why are Democrats relying on China for the sake of the green agenda? If you want to have a green agenda and you want to spend American taxpayer money, shouldn't we develop American companies that can produce products for the green agenda, not rely on China themselves?
Yeah, you would think so, but the problem is that they keep prioritizing politics over the needs of the American people. The Democrats, they set arbitrary timelines and standards. For example, the reducing emissions 50% by 2030 that Joe Biden promised under the Paris Climate Accord. That is not realistic. But instead of being honest and admitting that, he wants to hold to that standard. And to hold to that standard, he has to shut down American industries. And it's China that reaps the benefit. China loves the fact that American Democrats, the party in power right now, that they are pushing their Green New Deal agenda, because it shuts down important industrial actors here in the United States, and that productivity and those jobs materialize in China, where on paper they will pretend like they care about the environment, but they really don't. So it undermines overall environmental goals. It also suppresses productivity, and it lands those jobs and prosperity in another country. And Democrats, again, they are so committed to these political commitments, they are unwilling to open their eyes to the very real consequences being caused in the short term, not just on the jobs and economy side, but also in the high prices and the exacerbated inflation we, the American consumers, are having to deal with as well.
Well, Mandy, I'd say they're not stupid. I think they're doing this intentionally. They want us to sell our souls to China, all the while China can build new coal power plants. They're the largest world producer of greenhouse gases. They don't care. Mandy Gunasekara, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.